treadmill,
weight machine or treadmill or whatever it was. That defies logic.
What about Bush that kept getting beaten up and he had double black eyes and bloody lips? He'd say he fell down. I mean, that's not true.
He was usually, the one time he had the mark on his cheek was from
pretzel.
the time he choked on a pretzel. He said, but I heard he was very, very drunk that day. He was watching some football and passed out. So again, this for those of viewers and listeners who think Washington is a den of iniquity, I can tell you, tell them all it is. I've seen it firsthand.
Why did they kill the D.C. madam? I mean, I know you knew her well. You helped get her on the show. What happened there? I mean, she wasn't talking, or are they just getting rid of loose ends?
Well, she had some more information. She had documents she was about ready to release. We don't know what happened to that, by the way. She was seen removing a box of documents from a condo in Orlando and taking it to her mother's home in Tarpon Springs in Tampa Bay, Florida. And we don't know what happened to that. But there were other shoes that were going to drop in that matter. I know she was trying to get out of the U.S. and move to what was formerly East Berlin. She bought an apartment over there. I think for her it was a safe house. And I think it was a former CIA safe house because of the work she had done as a madam for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Absolutely. She was probably with the Central Intelligence Agency officially, undoubtedly unofficially. So this is how they treat their own yet again. We'll be back. I want to move out of the whole blackmail system, unless he's got other points he wants to add, and get into ISIS. It's so transparent that ISIS is Western funded and being protected. And I see these headlines. Pentagon is tweaking their ISIS strategy. They don't know what to do. It's a Saudi Arabian proxy army taking over. The Iraqi government has testimony and video. I mean, we knew it before it even happened. We said that they were going to change the name to confuse the public. And then I want to get into just other general areas. But before we do that, Wayne, you were talking about the climate getting crazier. The self-destructiveness, the starting stuff with China, the starting stuff with Russia. Nobody's lionizing those countries, but it seems like the elite really are bravado, chutzpah-driven, and it really is scary, covering D.C., being up in D.C., off and on between Florida. What is the climate? Where do you expect Obama to go in his last year and a half in office? The executive power grabs, I mean, all of it, the Republicans rolling over to everything, but still being indicted. What are the Democrats thinking, and who's in charge?
Well, I think Obama would like to speed up the clock and be out of office a lot sooner. I noticed he was pretty listless when he spoke yesterday at the National Hurricane Center in Miami about everybody getting prepared for the hurricane season. I just had the impression he seemed like he wanted to be somewhere else, anywhere but at the National Hurricane Center, telling Americans to how to go and access ready.com or ready.gov or whatever the website is. I think he's like other presidents. He's looking at his post-presidency. The museum and library are going to be in South Chicago with apparently a satellite facility in Hawaii.
He'll have his new money laundering operation foundation like the Clintons.
Or the Obama Foundation. I would hope he won't be as crooked as the Clintons have been with that. I mean, shaking down countries and companies for donations and then steering U.S. policy towards their favorite projects, which apparently is what Hillary was doing.
Well, she's cut and dry, having third world dictators give her money so she allows the State Department to authorize weapons transfers. This is the most criminal stuff you can imagine. Meanwhile, they're busting Hastert for covering up some wrestler, high school wrestler he buggered.
Well, they ought to bust all of them, in my opinion. There's very few in Washington who...
Oh, I agree, bust them all, but how does Hillary get away with it?
I mean, because they love her. She's look how they extol her. I mean, she's got two challengers for the Democratic nomination who don't get any press attention hardly, and when they do, it's sort of like, oh, these guys are also rans. Talking about Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley from Maryland. But this is how the media operates. You know, when I broke that Hastert story, I commented on that because back in '06, Anna Marie Cox, who was then Wonkette, if you recall that blog, this was her comment on my report on Hastert. She said, the problem is Wayne Madsen just makes S word up. We hear from well-placed sources that no one is having sex with Dennis Hastert. Well, I hope Ms. Cox likes her crow, even though it's served as a cold dish now. I'm only as good as my sources, and in that case, not only were the sources people who knew about Hastert in northern Illinois in the Chicago area, but members of the gay community in Washington were very open about this guy and what a basically a hypocrite he was. Supporting anti-gay rights, moves by the House. Yet everyone knew that his own secret life.
Sure, and you could tell body language. You've seen him prancing around with his boyfriend.
Yeah, that was one where you had to be there. It was myself, my colleague, and Charlie Rangel. We just thought that was so odd that here is the Speaker of the House with a very, very young Page. Normally, those guys are back in the office working, and he's acting like it's his chief of staff, his closest assistant. And, as I say, even Charlie Rangel looked over at that and, had that wry smile like, yeah, there he goes again.
Unbelievable. We're going to be back and get into ISIS, get into geopolitics and more with Wayne Madsen. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us. Supreme Court to rule they can start taking private pension funds, and I see the very same banks doing it in every country they run. I'm here raising the alarm. I don't think of that as exceptional. But I guess it is, and I think that's why we're in so much trouble. It's exceptional that Wayne Madsen's broken so many big stories, I can't even count them. And what's even more exceptional is that you hardly ever hear about it in the mainstream media. There's some comments today going, yeah, Wayne Madsen said this in some major newspapers. Where are the apologies? Where are the apologies that I had guests on, whistleblowers like Springman, about the CIA ordering known terrorists into the country before 9/11 and ordering the FBI to stand down? That's now in the 28 pages. It's now admitted. Where are the apologies from Glenn Beck and Fox News and all of them? They're never going to come. And it's not about me. It's not about Wayne Madsen. But it is about the truth and how it triumphs. And I know Wayne, because I know him well. He's a really good guy, even though he's not bragging. I'd imagine he's savoring, not on a power trip, but just savoring the fact that the truth outs, the truth ends up always surfacing, and that after all he's gone through, turning down bigger jobs, money, being harassed, death-threated, demonized, attacked, that more and more what he's written about is coming true. It's very exciting. You can see clips, a compilation with links to his website, his news site, WayneMadsenReport.com, at Infowars.com. Flashback. Investigative journalist broke key speaker Hastert blackmail sex scandal in 2006. Again, investigative journalist broke ex-speaker Hastert blackmail scandal in 2006. In 2006, Hastert was involved with the cover-up of a major sex scandal involving Republican congressmen. And I see a few commenters on YouTube and InfoWars saying, why do we care about some old corrupt weirdo? I'm glad he's been indicted, and this isn't even a story. Who cares? Arrest them all. It isn't about this molding piece of cheese. It's about the fact that they selectively are doing it. Why are they doing it? What does it signify? And does it mean they're about to roll up Boehner and the rest of these guys? This could be a coup against who's left in the Republican Party. And the Republicans could start striking back with all their dirt. This, I think, signifies a major war going on behind the scenes. That's what it generally does. And it just adds to this whole season of craziness. I want to close the book on this and get into some other big stories you're working on, Wayne, but in your gut, your sources, am I onto something here, or what do you think this signifies, or is it rogue FBI agents doing their job? What do you think is happening?
this isn't over yet, Alex. I would be remiss if I didn't add that among the House leadership at the outset of this House page scandal are 3 current U.S. senators who 2 of them were members of the House at the time. Roy Blunt, who's now a senator from Missouri, Shelley Moore Capito, who's now a senator from West Virginia, and the tutor of the House pages, the tutor, the person in charge of the security of these pages, who apparently was either asleep on the job or knew what was going on and looked the other way, is now a U.S. senator from the state of Nebraska, Ben Sass. You got to be careful how you say that, because it sounds like Ben's ass if you're not. If you're not
So it sounds like whoever runs the stable of these pages ends up getting a lot of power real quick.
Great, you mentioned that, the stabling. That was another thing that I reported on back then, that because the senators have larger staffs, they would bring in a lot of young male staffers and stable them. That was the word that was used at the time, stable them there, where they would then be able to be farmed out over to the House side. In other words, I guess the senators would go over and look and see which one they liked.
Yeah, it's like going to a whorehouse and picking which one you want.
3 senators who were mentioned to me in respect to that were George Allen from Virginia, Rick Santorum from Pennsylvania, and Jim Talent from Missouri.
Unbelievable.
None of them are in the Senate any longer.
Why has this story kind of cooled off? Cover up? Because, the Catholic Church thing just keeps coming out. Is every major institution infested with pedos?
Well, look, my first experience with them was when I was with the Navy in 1982. I was the operations officer at a classified Navy facility in Oregon, and the FBI and NCIS, which is now NCIS, it was NIS at the time, came to me and said, look, we need you to help us investigate your commanding officer. I said, for what? They said, he's a kingpin in this child pornography ring based in Chicago, of all places. And he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only military officer. There were admirals involved. And then, of course, later, in the 80s, we found out how high up it went, right to the White House, which is one of the original FBI agents told me at the time when we were doing a postmortem on that investigation. He says, this thing goes all the way to the White House. I was shocked.
I talk a lot about this with Joel Scalzi and other people, light side, dark side, and government. Government's not our enemy, but it is filled with cliques of bad guys, cliques of good people. Percentage-wise, you've been around the block, is the government more corrupt or less corrupt, or do we just know more now and it's the same? And take the FBI. I mean, sometimes the FBI does great things, sometimes it does bad things, sometimes it's political, sometimes it's not. Does it depend on the division? Basically, what's the lay of the land from your research? How many of these people are good? How many are bad?
I think it's getting worse, because in the old days, what was the worst they would get a member of Congress on? Well, bribes, taking money. Remember Adam Clayton Powell and people like that. I mean, they were actually good congressmen for their districts, but they, had sticky fingers when it came to money. Well, of course, that's bad, taking money, taking bribes. But now we're into this really bizarre stuff. I mentioned Vitter with the diaper, they call him Diaper Dave, and now this stuff with Hastert and Foley and Larry Craig, Mr. Whitestance at the Minneapolis men's room stall, being arrested by an undercover vice cop. This stuff that started in the early 80s with Bob Bauman, the Republican conservative congressman from Maryland who was arrested in a men's room, and it's just gotten worse since. I'm not saying that they didn't have things like this happen in the past, but it certainly was not reported by the press if it was going on. But I think it's more. There's more of this going on now from my vantage point.
Well, the issue I notice is the more fairy-like a congressman is, the more anti-gay they are, and then they get busted, out in a bathroom. And I'm not bashing anybody. I'm just using that term because they act effeminate. They act like the classic thing where you be in a grocery store and say, hey, I bet that guy's gay over there. But then that's their right. Then it graduates into really deviant criminal stuff. And I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. But then I guess that's who gravitates toward power. What percentage, and I've asked this of a lot of people in Washington, what percentage are gay versus pedophiles versus heterosexual? And are there more pedos in either party, Wayne, or how does this work?